Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Tuesday, January 27th, 2026, and today we are talking about what the next month will look like on this farm, assuming all the ice melts one day, bed shapers versus rotary plows, and the standing soil blockers. So let's do it. All right, everyone, welcome to Tilth Tuesday, your weekly reminder that you can get living soil compost and potting mixes from the Bonafide nerds at Tilth Soil. Check out Nathan on the Composter Podcast, Season 4, Episode 3, or head to tilthsoil.com to learn more. I hope everyone's week is off to a nice start. Hopefully, everyone's tunnels and animals and such survived that ice storm if you're in our half of the United States. I remember when we had ice storms, when we had livestock, that was unequivocally the most stressed out I got about the sheep. We were limited in our barn space, and water would become like quite a battle in single-digit temperatures. Wasn't super fun. I missed the livestock for certain reasons. Ice storms are not one of them. There was this weird little line in this particular storm where it changed from snow to wintry mix and then ice, and some folks predominantly south of us just got all the ice. So we're thinking of you all and hoping you got warm enough this week to get bailed out a little bit there. I did not do much yesterday of interest here on the farm beyond taking the kids sledding, which was fun. Now, Kentucky is extremely hilly, and there's some great sledding opportunities. We're very sloped on our farm, but not quite sloped enough to make for great sledding, unfortunately. But what I love about kids in general is that they don't really care. They just kind of make it work. It's an attitude that I certainly myself could use more of, but I'm also very glad that our kids have that. I sometimes feel as a society we favor knowledge over creativity with our children, or we separate the two, or at least that's what I felt like myself growing up, that art and music and other creative pursuits weren't really important, that I could, quote unquote, go play, but the important stuff was in the books. But I think creativity is just practice for ingenuity, for learning to, take what you have and do the best you can with it. That is definitely something I wish for my kids, for them to intuitively think, how can we take this problem and make something useful out of it? Or just as importantly, something fun and or beautiful, like a really boring slope. Anyway, creativity is not distinct from knowledge. Rather, creativity is a tool for employing knowledge, maybe the best one that we have. Certainly the most fun. Anyway, that was not what I set out to talk about today. Today, I thought I would talk about what the next month looks like on our farm. I did these sort of updates like kind of all throughout last season, and I figured I'd sort of bring them back once per month this year throughout the growing season so you can get an idea of what I'm up to on our farm here in Kentucky Zone 6B. Now, of course, one obligatory note is that this does not mean you will be doing the same thing as I will be doing at the same time. If you're in a different region, obviously that makes sense, but if you're not a commercial farm, you will not have to do nearly the same amount of like winter seeding that I do and such. Or more to that point, if you are in a backyard, garden situation and don't have the seed starting setup that you need to get seeds through February, you can just buy your longer season starts later, or even just start them later because you don't have the pressure of the market. Now, we could find a nursery and do that sort of thing too, and no doubt there are larger growers who do in fact use nurseries, but we've got the means and enjoy the process of starting our own tomatoes and cucumbers and all those things, sometimes to our detriment. So anyway, seed starting is a big part of what we'll be up to for the next month. In fact, in the next week or so, I will be getting our tomatoes going. Indeed, even with these cold temperatures here, it's time to get those things started. I will start both the rootstock and the scion stock because we graft our tomatoes at the same time, trying to time their growth so that the bottoms, the rootstock, don't outgrow the tops. Our peppers are currently hanging out and getting ready to germinate in our hot water closet, like the closet where our hot water heater is, because I wanted somewhere that was, warm enough to germinate them, but also when I saw the temperatures coming up this week, I decided against, like a heat mat so as not to germinate them too quickly and have to protect them for a week in the house and moving them in and out and all that stuff. Not my favorite. I've decided to try an early round of broccoli this year as well, and that will start sometime in mid-February. I haven't done that for a long time since we stopped doing our CSA, but frankly, I kind of miss it. I love some good spring broccoli. Again, I'll start that in probably mid-February. I'm also going to give grafted cucumbers another go. Those will likewise be started around the same time in mid-ish February. That gives me enough time to graft them, heal them, and then plant them in like late March or early April for our tunnel production. Grafting tends to slow down the whole crop because it takes several weeks for them to sort of heal once you cut them. So you have to add a few weeks onto the crop production. I will start some lettuce and cilantro in early February as well as some radishes and that sort of thing. But one under the radar crop that I will start in February is actually parsley, because it's fairly slow to germinate and grow, but it will grow all summer throughout the heat and then deep into the fall. Parsley, I usually start, all of those crops, I usually start in soil blocks, though you could sow cilantro in February into the soil if you had enough space for it. It does fine in the field. It does fine in the tunnels for us. It's just a little slower to grow, obviously, in the field. Fennel is another crop that I plan to start in the end of February in transplants. Occasionally we get dry enough here to do some bed prep / soil prep in February, but I don't hold my breath there. That's part of why it's brilliant to go no-till, because you can kind of do anything in February without having to work the soil. At best, I hope to do some early broad forking just to get a jump on it, like especially for our first field carrots, which go out in mid-March here. February is an interesting month in that it can still be cold and snowy, but the return of the sunlight gives you a lot to work with in terms of like greenhouse space, because with a small amount of supplementary heat and all that sunlight, we can usually get some decent rates of growth by the end of the month. That said, it's still very much a hurry up and wait month and a stay on your toes month. One slip up and you forget to cover your transplants with row cover or bring them inside on a really cold day and it's toast. Not the good kind, like the bad kind of toast, like the burnt kind, but like frozen. I don't know, toast analogy kind of fell apart there. Anyway, lots of prepping, not as much sowing or growing, but it does slowly start to pick up in February. We start to get hints of spring, which are nice. Things start to green up, speed up, and grow. It's often also interrupted by snowfalls and single-digit temperatures. So you got to kind of slow your roll a little bit. Gotta love this totally normal job that we have. Anyway, what does your February look like? Let us know. And otherwise, we're off to see the wizard, the wonderful wizard of bed shaping. Didn't even know that was a wizard. BRB. Today's episode is brought to you by Ohio Earth Food. So you got your soil tested or need your soil tested, it's time to contact Ohio Earth Food. Since 1972, they have been growers' trusted source for organic soil amendments to apply before you plant to prevent those deficiency symptoms that limit production. Their knowledgeable staff have all been a part of certified organic operations and can help you choose the best products for your soil and deliver or ship them right to your farm. With locations in Northwest Ohio and just north of Madison, Wisconsin, Ohio Earth Food wants to be your partner for organic inputs. Don't count on luck this year. Start your seeds in the Seed Catapult potting soil and put their Revita fertilizers in your beds, and rest assured that your plants will have all the nutrients, stimulants, and energy for whatever comes their way. Feed your soil and let your soil feed the plants. Visit them at ohioearthfood.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by High Mowing Organic Seeds. High Mowing Organic Seeds is celebrating their 30th anniversary with 48 fabulous new varieties for 2026. Highlights include downy mildew-resistant cucumbers, a poppy that looks like cotton candy, and 12 new tomato varieties. High Mowing offers more than 750 varieties of certified organic, non-GMO vegetables, flowers, herbs, and cover crops, all trialed for optimal performance in organic growing systems. High Mowing has the professional quality seeds and supportive grower reps to get you from seed to harvest. Visit highmowingseeds.com to request a catalog and use code 26NOTILL, all caps, for 10% off your order of $100 or more. That's highmowingseeds.com. All right, back to the show. If you, the listener or viewer, are enjoying this podcast, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. Does this work bring you $2 worth of value every month? $5 worth of entertainment? Maybe the other way around. I will try to get to questions from everywhere that questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon questions, so you can consider chipping in. Now, today's Patreon question comes to us from Patreon member Chad Hayes, who writes, quote, "Hi, Jesse. My question is about establishing new raised beds. I'm starting a new market garden on land previously used for organic grain production. The soil was disked after harvesting oats in the fall, and I plan to till using the landowner's riding tractor in the spring. I found a great deal on a barely used BCS 749 plus power harrow. I've seen lots of people using the rotary plow to establish raised beds, but I am also considering the bed shaper kit, 1 meter horizontal bar with angled discs on each side, followed by a drag chain. It claims to be able to form 30-inch wide by 3-inch high beds and would save me around $2,000 Canadian compared to the rotary plow, which I don't anticipate needing after initial bed establishment. Do you have any experience with this attachment or any idea how well this would work?" End quote. All right, so this is great. This kind of fits nicely into our tool focus as well on Tuesdays. So I do not have experience with this particular bed shaper, but I do have a lot of experience with the rotary plow and power harrow. And I also do have a decent amount of experience with bed shapers on riding tractors. So I can give it my best go, with commoners feeling encouraged to fill in the gaps. First, what are we talking about? Well, As Chad said, the bed shaper is just a bar with discs on each side that sort of pull the soil up into a bed shape at whatever width that you want. You drag the discs through tilled soil, and the discs sort of form a perfectly straight bed for you by pulling the soil up and in, sort of, like mounding it. The rotary plow, for contrast, is a corkscrew-looking implement, PTO driven, so it spins when you turn it on, that essentially throws dirt off to one side and can be used to pile up beds or till it up, like raw ground or something. Then the power harrow is a heavy soil working implement that lightly stirs the top 6 inches or so of the soil with tines that rotate perpendicular to the soil, as opposed to the tiller that sort of operates like sort of like a fast moving scoop that pulverizes the soil. So for that bed shaper, you will need, or at least probably want, wheel extensions and weights if you plan to use it. I'm not sure it's necessary, the wheel extensions, but I'm pretty sure it's designed for that. And watching Joel from Earth Tools video on it that we will link in the show notes, it looks like you will also have to make about 3 passes per bed depending on your soil context. Fluffier, lighter soils may not take quite as much work or quite as many passes. For a riding tractor, the weight is typically enough that 1, maybe 2 passes does the trick, but walk-behind tractors don't quite have the power, weight, or hydraulic pressure to do that so easily. So you would have to till the soil as it sounds like you plan to do, and then add the wheel spacers, which you probably will not want for the power harrow, as I believe it's designed to have the tires riding on top of the bed. That's not a deal breaker, but it will add extra time to the use, assuming you will want to hill them up every season. Like 3 inches is not super tall, and it will compact down, so you're going to lose some of that advantage of having a raised bed using that hiller. Hilling up every season, of course, will require you to have well-managed pathways too, so that the soil there is loose enough to actually pull up with the discs, and so that you don't have to just till the whole thing over again and do it again. The 749 BCS, this is just a walk-behind tractor, has a decent amount of power, but I could imagine that raising the beds with those discs could get a little tough if you're keeping the beds permanent. Now, I like the rotary plow for its versatility, but I'm not going to say it's an absolute requisite tool. I use it less than our flail mower, and I use our flail mower more than I do our power harrow, but the rotary plow is nice to have in situations like this year where I'm reshaping some beds for specific drainage issues, a story that I'll return to at another time, or it's nice if I want to bury some irrigation or start new plots, etc. Do I need it? Not really, but it is handy to have around, this rotary plow, and especially if you need really, really deep beds, like in a poor drainage situation, or if you have a little corner somewhere that you want to build a quick garden bed or herb bed or something. It's pretty maneuverable, so you don't have to, for instance, use a tiller and then swap on the bed shaper and all that stuff. You just use the rotary plow for the whole shebang, which is nice. It doesn't make quite as straight of beds as, like the bed shaper would, but it can be done pretty accurately. Honestly, I don't think you'll regret either, but I do suspect you will get more use over the lifetime of the tool out of the rotary plow than you would out of the bed shaper. Anyway, maybe there was something useful in that segment. I hope so. And listeners, feel free to add your 2 cents as always, especially if you have experience with the bed shaper. Otherwise, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we will talk about standing and blocking, which is not my favorite dance move yet. Be right back. Today's episode is brought to you by Johnny's Selected Seeds. Johnny's Selected Seeds is a proud supporter of Growers Daily. At Johnny's, they do more than sell seeds. They grow them. They trial them to see how they perform on Johnny's research farm in Maine and across the U.S. and Canada. Only the best varieties are added to their catalog and website. When you need proven varieties you can count on and detailed guidance from seedling to harvest, consider Johnny's your trusted growing partner. JohnnySeeds.com. That's JohnnySeeds.com. All right, back to the show. All right, so that bed shaper wasn't our tool focus for the day, in fact, though it could have been, but rather our tool focus today is going to be the standing soil blocker. I'm going to try and cover all the different types of trays and such throughout the spring as people are starting to start their own crops, and the standing blockers were just the first one that came up on my list, as is clearly not in alphabetical order or in any order, really. Just a list of tools, and I try to get them into the conversation in time to actually be relevant. So let's talk about the standing soil block makers out there, because they are slightly more expensive than your average soil block maker, but there are some advantages in terms of how much time that they save you or take that are worth considering if you are wanting to do soil blocks on a commercial scale. Now, these standing blockers, so-called because you stand up while using them as opposed to sitting or bending over, being able to stand and make blocks makes the entire idea of soil blocking significantly less at least physically taxing, but it is still very physical compared to filling trays. And yes, at some point I will get to wind strips and cell trays and all those things. The standing blockers come in a few different block sizes: 6 block blockers, which are roughly like 50 cell equivalents, 12 block blockers, which are roughly the 72 cell equivalents, 35 block blockers, which are roughly like the 128 equivalent is what I think of them, and the 20 cell blockers, which is somewhere in between. Now, I say equivalents there because they aren't exact. The 35 block maker will put down 105 blocks on a tray, and all of the blocks will be roughly, like double or more the size to a 128 cell tray. So, but in terms of what crops you might use for those individual blocks, that's kind of how I tend to think of these. Lettuces, bok choy, that sort of stuff. That's the sort of crop list that goes with like the 35 block standing blocker in my mind. But it could also be other crops as well that usually go in bigger cells like broccoli and cabbage and so on. So anyway, what you put in the blocks is up to you. If you have money for one of the standing blockers, to me, the 35 blocker is the most versatile. So I would probably throw down on that first. In terms of time savings, the 35 block maker can make one tray of 105 blocks in about 90 seconds or less. That's an improvement on the equivalent hand blocker, but obviously much slower than the average cell tray. A few 128 cell trays can be made in the time it takes to make one tray of 35 blocks. What I like about it though is the standing, obviously. That's nice. I've made infinity trays of hand blocks, soil blocks, and I almost cried when I first tried the standing blockers. It was so much faster. But anyway, I like the standing. I like the speed. I also like the ease. The hand blockers can wear out the hands really fast. The standing blocker can do that a little bit too, but it's a little bit easier on the hands, though it is definitely a little bit harder on the shoulders. However, not as hard on the back. The hand blocker is also $100 less than the standing blocker. So for that reason, and because you might rarely need as many blocks, in a backyard situation, the hand blockers are probably fine. But on a commercial scale, the standing blocker is a significant and worthwhile upgrade in my opinion. And yes, I will later compare these to the Swift blockers, which put down a lot more cells. We have had our standing blocker for nearly 10 years and it's still going strong. I still use it for specific applications. I have stopped using it for lettuce since we got our 200 block Swift blocker, but we'll still use it for kale, chard, and other 60th day crops. And oftentimes I'll use it for the onions. So yeah, I think if you're eyeing it and it makes sense for your production level, then I do love my standing blocker. Watch my videos on soil blocking to get tips on how best to use these, because there is a learning curve for sure, but definitely a tool I love. Let us know your thoughts or questions or experiences using the soil blockers. I will one day try to get my hands on one of those Johnny's commercial soil blockers, but haven't had an extra, like $900 to play around with yet, unfortunately. Stupid lottery and all its stupid odds. Anyway, put your thoughts in the comments, and I think otherwise we're done here for this Tilth Tuesday. Don't forget, No Till Growers is a nonprofit 501c3, so donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. Please make sure to like and subscribe and or follow wherever you're getting this podcast. That's an easy way to help us out as well. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors, and if you'd ever like to sponsor the show, you can reach out to Farmer Michelle at notillgrowers.com. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music, Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing, and also my wife Hannah for absolutely everything in the world. Also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear while I get a sip of tea.
Wish that we could talk the same.
Pick up a hat or a copy of my book, The Living Soil Handbook, or a beanie like the one I'm wearing that's keeping me warm today in our increasingly cold house through this cold week. And you do that over at notillgrowers.com to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/notillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or you sign up in the month of January, you get a shout on the show. So no new signups today, but we will return to our story on Thursday because it'll make sense tomorrow. Signups, of course, pending, and figure out what the heck is in that dang package that Lori got in her glass shop. I'm as curious as anyone. Thanks for watching and or listening. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye.
Life beside yours is all you ever seem to me. See you talk about hell.